For our next keynote, you'll be hearing from the CEO at Ocado Group, Tim Steiner. Tim will be interviewed by co-CEO at Omni Talk, Chris Walton.
Woo! All right, Tim, you ready to go?
We're ready.
I'm ready, yeah. So I was really excited when Groceryshop asked me to do this because I remember, and I was talking to a few people in the audience too, and they shared the same feeling that I do, which was, I think it was back in 2018, you spoke at either Groceryshop or Shop Talk, and it was the single most memorable moment of my Shop Talk / Groceryshop experience. So I'm excited for this.
Thank you.
Yeah. But with that said now, that was, God, 7 years ago, right? And a lot's changed since then. And so no script, no note cards today. I want to get frank with you first and say, you know, Kroger announced that they're reevaluating their warehousing. But by the same token, you operate in, I think it's 11 countries, right?
Correct.
You work with 13 different retail partners across those 11 countries.
Yep.
And you're also a retailer, which is something I think is important to consider too. So my question for you to start out is, what are the universal truths that you've seen across those geographies when it comes to doing grocery e-commerce the right way?
Sure, look, it's a great question. And the answer is almost every one of these markets is different in a number of ways.
Okay.
And so, you know, if you look at the market here in the US, it's quite an evenly split market between delivery to home and pickup. The delivery to home is majority focused in the first kind of 4 or 5 hours from the order being made. If you look at the UK market, which is one of the most advanced markets in the world, as the last speaker was just talking about, it's 95% home delivery. And, you know, 85 or 90% of that is delivered next day. Right? So they're just different markets. If we go across the channel to France, it's 90% pickup. And it's not short lead time. And so the real truths, the universal truths are, there are different models, they're applicable in different places. So if you've got a large scheduled delivery business, the big warehouses we are historically known for are still the best thing to operate from. You can sell the largest range with the freshest food at the lowest prices because they are the cheapest things to operate. So they are the best thing for scheduled delivery, which ought to be the majority of the market in most countries, as in they're the hypermarket of online grocery delivery. However, they're the worst thing if you build one that's to do, you know, $500 million or $1 billion, and 3 years in, you're doing $50 million in them. The fixed costs will you know, drown any chance you'd ever have of turning them profitable.
Right.
So over the last few years, we've learned how to build them smaller and start them smaller. So the last two that we've commissioned, one in Poland and one in Spain, are kind of $300 million in end state size, turning on $100 million and able to turn profitable at $100 million of sales, like a third full. And today we can build them in half the footprint that we did before. So like £500 million in 150,000 square foot, which halves the capex that goes into it, halves the rent, halves the rates and all those kind of other charges. And we can do that at massively higher levels of productivity. And we hit around 315 units shipped for a labor hour last week, which was £900 of groceries for an all-in labor cost with all of the extras and fringe and benefits on it of about £20. So we've got down in a facility in the UK to 2.2% variable operating costs. They're the best. But if you're doing pickup as the main channel,
right,
and if the 50% that's home delivery is 25 of it ultra short lead time and 25 of it a little bit longer, then doing it out of a store it makes a lot of sense. But the labor's getting more expensive and the labor's getting scarcer. And so we've introduced store-based automation. We can build it as small as 3,500 or 4,000 square feet up to kind of 15,000 square feet. Whether you want to do $8 million or $35 million in the site, whether you want to do 10,000 SKUs or 25,000 SKUs in there and take out kind of 8, 9, 10 points of your operating costs because the automation is we're able to miniaturize it, take up very small space, do enormous throughputs, incredible efficiency.
Okay. I want to ask you more about that in a second, but before we do that, so I asked you about the truths. I'm curious too, like what mistakes have you seen grocers make across the geographies?
I think the biggest thing that we do, and mistake's a strong word, but biggest thing we encourage our retailers that we work with to do is to understand that online grocery retailing is not the same as grocery retailing. And so your merchandising, your marketing, your promotional strategies need to change. Don't choose the busiest holiday weekend of the year and promote, slabs of water and promote pumpkins or promote something that's going to fill up the vans, the scarce vans that you own, and fill them up on the busiest weekend of the year with a zero or low margin item that weighs a lot of kilograms or pounds, a lot of quarts or liters, right? And so think about online grocery retailing. We always say to retailers, don't sell loose onions, loose bananas, or loose apples. Sell them in packs, right? One pick, one handling unit. Don't promote 1 liter cartons of juice without promoting the 6-pack. So that people don't switch out of a 6-pack into 6 singles. You then got to pick individually, and by the time you throw them in the bag, take up more cube than the multi-packs. So we try and say, we think the best thing to do is to price like a hypermarket. Tell consumers you're not paying a premium to get the goods delivered at home. You've got a token delivery fee. In the UK, that's under 2%. But then run the same promos, run the same pricing, just make a few exceptions so that you don't do things that are foolish online. And we do see a lot of retailers thinking this is exactly the same business as it is in store. And it's just not quite the same business.
The former merchant in me is like almost having a heart attack because I'm like, oh my God, I can't promote my pumpkins. That's crazy. But it makes sense. I guess merchandising online is very different than what you would do in the stores because you're trying to get traffic to the stores versus what you're trying to accomplish online. All right. I want to talk to you about speed too, because there's a lot of conversations about speed. We hear 30 minutes, we hear 3 hours, we hear same day, we hear next day. What's your take on that? Speed as an idea.
Look, probably the most successful retailer of our generation always used to say that, the customers are never going to ask for it slower. They're never going to ask for less range. They're never going to ask to pay higher prices. And that's all true. Having said that, those are all relevant points. And the quicker you get groceries to somebody, the more expensive it is to fulfill. The more expensive it is to pick a single order in a local branch, get it on a bike or a car and deliver it on a point-to-point delivery to one customer. And so the answer is that when we saw the likes of Get Here and Gorillas saying, we're going to take 80% of the grocery market in the UK in the next 5 years, I called it out then and said, you're not. It doesn't mean there isn't demand for the services that we were hearing about before. We work with Uber Eats through our Zoom platform in the UK. Just like in bricks and mortar retailer, you've got kind of corner shops or, gas station forecourt shops. You've got, drugstores. You've got high street supermarkets. You've got convenience stores and you've got hypermarkets. Hypermarkets is the volume because that's where consumers get the best range, the best freshness, and the best prices. And that's what we see on what we call scheduled deliveries. But scheduled deliveries for us used to mean largely next day. For the last 20 years, 95% of scheduled delivery was next day. I think that on our own platform, we're moving that. We've got some sites in the world that are up to 25 to 30% same day today. That's going to migrate to probably 50 to 60%. They're going to be from 2 hours. And we've seen deliveries now in the UK where we're starting to roll out this new software that are 2.5 hours out from a 50,000 range in a van that's going out on an 8-hour shift with all the efficiency that means that we can charge hypermarket prices, token delivery fees, and make, as large a margin as any bricks and mortar retailer in the UK out of that warehouse. So that's changing. But I think we ought to just always think not it's one or the other. Consumers need both. Sometimes you just need something and you need it now. And that's where the kind of, the convenience, the immediacy services kick in. And sometimes you're planning your week and you want to spend $100, £100, $150. You want the biggest range. You want the best selection. You want guaranteed freshness. And that's when the other services that are coming out of other facilities really start to kick in.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like convenience trumps the universal truth of speed, that like Jeff Bezos was so fond of saying. The way you put that makes sense to me. So talk to me, because as I'm reading between the lines of what you're discussing, there's some elements of the micro-fulfillment concept. And I think there's a lot of ways people define that too. So I'd love for you to define it, how you think about that concept. And there's been a lot of starts and stops in that arena, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years. How are you thinking about that? Is that concept it doesn't sound like it's dead by any means. It sounds like it's evolving to you, and you think it's still very much in play throughout the geographies you serve. Is that right?
Yeah, look, I think it's very much in play. And as I say, markets where there's a lot of demand for immediacy, or there's a lot of demand for pickup, there has been a lot of potential for micro-fulfillment centers. We saw people trying to do automated ones. Then we saw this huge growth in the kind of VC-funded, entirely manual ones. That was always a nonsense, given the price of labor outside of the developing markets. That makes sense in Russia, in Turkey, in China, in India. That doesn't make sense in the US, the UK, Germany, or Australia. But although we saw players come into that market, they've largely fallen away, the automation ones. And that's not because the idea wasn't right. It's because the automation wasn't right, their execution wasn't right, their software wasn't right. They just weren't good enough to make it work for the retailers. So you saw the retailers buying 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them. You saw the suppliers saying, we're going to sell 1,000, but you never saw the 1,000 getting ordered. Today, I think we've moved on, and we are able to leverage the new quick kit that we started developing a few years ago that we launched. We called it Reimagined. Lighter weight grids, lighter weight robots, took about 80% of the weight out, and various enhancements that we made to our grids and bots system, including robots that pick on the top of the grid, sharing the same airspace as the robots that move the boxes around, and immensely complex feet. We've got those picking 47.5% in one of our big warehouses in the UK. We're about to cross 100 million picks life to date through the robots. The same accuracy or higher accuracy than humans. The same density in the packed bags. Now we can put all of that in a tiny format, as I said, for down as low as about 3.5 to 4,000 feet. And we're working with retailers anywhere from 4,000 feet to about 14,000 feet, depending on how much range they want and how much volume they want out of those sites. And I think this could change the game and actually enable that. The other key with them is automatic dispatch. So one of the very valuable patents in our 3,000 patent large portfolio is one that's been very battle tested and is about putting the product that we've picked back into the grid. So we can pick it, put it back into the grid, geocode the customer coming, move it to the edge of the grid as the customer comes, dispatch it through the grid into a port. And retailers spend a lot of money doing dispatch. Right. Historically, analysts have always got this wrong. They've always said the customer comes to pick it up, it costs nothing. But of course, actually, the retailer gives it to the customer. But it's much worse than doing a time and motion study of saying how long does it take to give it to a customer. Because if you've got 16 customers coming between 4 and 5, they don't come nicely, one every 4-ish minutes. In fact, a whole load of them come right at the start of the hour. And then not very many of them come during the hour. And then a number of them come right at the end of the hour, which is exactly the same window that the start of the next hour is coming. And so what you find is they're very lumpy, and you have to have excess staff there to hand it over. And a number of the retailers that we work with, you see them spending 3, 4, 5% of sales handing it to a customer. And at low volume, they can actually spend more than 10%, which is actually more than doing the delivery themselves. So these automated ports that take that out more than compensate for the extra costs of taking one of our kind of $500 million sites and splitting it into 50 locations. So I can put it into 50 locations close to the customer. Obviously, there's more engineering costs. Obviously, you've got 50 comms lines. There's some things that don't scale down, but you can save an enormous amount by being able to dispatch stuff straight into a customer port. Amazing accuracy, amazing speed, and take out a lot of costs that way. So that's a product I think we'll see if we look forward 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot of that product work, assuming that it works as well as I expect it to. We're just literally going to start building the first few of those now, but they're all leveraging kit that we have live in larger facilities.
I want to ask you more about that, because the way you're describing it, it sounds a lot like buy online, pick up in store, which you said at the outset is a large portion of the US business. I think I was checking, like Bricks Meets Clicks said it's like 43% of the e-commerce business here in the States. So with the grocers in the audience then, and it seems like the other point about it too, I would say, is it seems like it's causing more problems than we realize a lot of times in the industry too. I mean, yes, it could be a cheaper way to fulfill, quote unquote, but it's causing a lot of problems in the store from an execution standpoint. So how, given what you just said, how would you tell the US grocers to think about the evolution of that space in particular?
Look, as we've worked with retailers around the world, in their stores, and their store estates obviously of vital importance, you tend to see, a broad spectrum of stores. You see some stores that absolutely need the volumes that e-commerce brings to them in order to have a fast enough turnover of goods inside them to have fresh food on the shelves, to manage their waste. You also see stores, though, particularly in dense urban conurbations, where the retailer would love to have another 5 or 10,000 square foot and could absolutely use it if they did. And when they managed to build a warehouse, we launched in the last year down in Australia, for example, with Coles, as they're able to push the volumes in Sydney and Melbourne into the warehouses, the customers are getting able to get back in the stores, and you see pickup of sales there. And so, one of the advantages that our clients have and our potential future clients have working with us is just that we do store pick, we do dark stores, we do manual warehouses, we'll do automated stores from 3,000 square foot to 600,000 square foot. We'll do low ones, we'll do normal height ones, and we'll do double stacks and triple stacks in Asia and stuff like that. And so we can have a very honest look with a customer now. We've got a lot of data, we've got a lot of experience in going, there isn't one size fits all. A lot of people like to say, oh, I make big sheds. Oh, I do store pick. Oh, I build micros. Oh, I'm an aggregator or a platform. And that's the answer. The platform that we work with our retailers will take orders from marketplaces. It will take orders from its own, apps. It will aggregate those and pick those in stores, in dark stores, in automated micros, in big warehouses. It will put those on vans, on third-party couriers, on own couriers, into lockers. It'll just do all of it. And so it's horses for courses. In your retail businesses, you've got convenience stores, you've got high street stores, you've got out-of-town, giant ones. You've got giant ones with more range in them, whatever it might be. This is the same thing in e-commerce. The customer wants you to be, the shopper wants you to be everywhere, and you should be everywhere. Now, sometimes the economics say fulfill in store. If you're going to do $1 million in store, don't bother even looking at automation. You're never going to justify the amortization of automation, the engineering cost of keeping it running 99.9% of the time. But if you're doing $5 million in a store, $10 million in a store, $20 million of e-commerce in a store, automation is the answer. And so, and if you're doing a huge scheduled delivery business, big sheds is the answer. But I think, you just got to look at what it is you're doing, what you're trying to do, what you've proven you can do, and then make the right investments. And I think that's much easier to do today than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the progress of what you can do in the automation compared to the progress of efficiency in stores is just chalk and cheese. The new warehouses are so much more efficient. And as you say, with labor costs rising all the time, taxes on labor going up all the time, the availability of labor getting harder all the time, and shoppers getting more demanding, we need this automation to work, and we're really confident it does.
So I want to extend that last point you made too, because the other thing that's happening with the labor costs, there's also a lot of macroeconomic pressures here, and some of these capital investments are pretty substantial when you get right down to it. So how would you advise those in the audience to think through the macroeconomic implications that we're seeing across the industry right now?
Look, it's really, really difficult because labor and governments are making it more expensive to operate in retail generally. And so we need to look at what can this automation do to drive out cost. And, we've always, and as you say, we are a grocery retailer as well. So we use our own products and we work at how to drive out costs so that we can do very competitive pricing to the shoppers. Efficiency is huge. And you want to be able to ship loads of products, and you want to be able to do it with absolutely the minimum amount of labor involved. And then the bigger cost is actually delivery. And so we're doing an enormous amount of work on delivery at the moment and helping retailers to be able to kind of have a dial to say, how much can I afford to spend on a delivery? Do I need to have longer, wider windows? We've been doing 1 hour windows for 25 years, but do I actually need to do 4 hour windows? Do I need to push customers into more specific slots to have the AI version of a milk round? We've deployed over 130 instances of AI around the business today, more and more all the time, but some of it, improves routing efficiency, improves warehouse efficiency. You've got to look at your cost base. It's getting more and more expensive to operate, and shoppers don't want to pay more. They want amazing value. You're all doing an amazing job, of course, but you've got to keep doing it.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get you out of here on this because I'm curious what your take is here. I always like to end these sessions when I can with a little prediction. So if you look 5 to 10 years out, you put your prediction hat on, how do you think grocery shopping will be different then than it is today?
Well, interestingly, I think in store it's going to be not massively dissimilar to it is today. We just saw, certainly in the UK, we just saw Amazon pull out of their the fresh stores, the ones that you didn't have tills in and things. So the customers haven't leapt onto that technology yet anyway. But I think that the channel shift is just going to continue to go. E-commerce is going to continue to grow. And the larger and larger it gets, then we're going to get to the point where we can fulfill it cheaper than running a hypermarket. And if we actually find somebody out there who turns the pricing of e-com lower than the hypermarket, then you're going to see a much faster acceleration. Whether that's going to come in the next 5 years, it's going to come in the next 10 years.
Wow.
And as I say, what AI is doing and what robotics is doing to enable us to get more and more efficient in the warehouses means that they're, ultimately, do customers want to pay a premium to go to a store? But stores have got their place and the e-com's got its place. And I think it's just working out how you blend it all together that's the challenge for the retailers.
Awesome. Tim Steiner, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.